Dear students, in this module we will study the mortality situation in developed and developing countries and also an analysis of the situation. Specifically, we will cover aspects like epidemiological transition, then we will study the trends in life expectancy at birth, which is an important indicator of mortality situation of any country or region. Then we will talk about child survival, then we move to adult mortality, the kind of changes in adult mortality over a period of time. Then we will look into life expectancy at 60, which is again an important indicator of mortality situation. Let us look at epidemiological transition. Global increase in living standards, improvement in health status and consequent reduction in mortality in the last 6.5 decades can be considered as the most significant achievements related to development. Central to this kind of transformation has been the epidemiological transition from predominantly infectious causes of death to a predominance of deaths due to chronic and degenerative diseases. This kind of epidemiological transition also entailed a shift in the age pattern of mortality from childhood disease pattern and deaths to a situation where disease and mortality are highly concentrated at the older ages. The driving force in this transition is socio-economic development accompanied by investment in public health and education. Let us look at the differentials. In spite of impressive global progress, the large disparities remain in terms of levels of mortality across the countries as well as regions. These differentials result from uneven progress in public health and development, and these differentials also reflect inequalities in access to food, safe drinking water, sanitation, medical care and other basic human needs. Let us look at reduction in mortality. Reduction in mortality, particularly that of child and maternal mortality, has been a core target of the internationally agreed development goals, including the program of action of ICPD and UN Millennium Declaration, besides the latest 2030 agenda for sustainable development. Let us look at life expectancy at birth. Life expectancy at birth summarizes mortality rates in population across all ages for a given time period. The life expectancy at birth gives the average number of years a person would live if he or she were exposed to the same kind of age specific mortality throughout his or her lifetime. Globally, number of years that a newborn is expected to live given the prevailing risk of mortality increased by 24 years during 1950 and 2015. This represents a rise of about 3.6 years per decade in the last 65 years. The trends also indicate that between 2010 and 2015, 55% of the world population lived in countries with a life expectancy at birth of 70 years plus, and about 10% of the population lived in countries with life expectancy of 80 years or more. During 1950 and 55, only few countries had a level of life expectancy more than 70 years, and only 1% of the world's population lived in such kind of countries. During that time, almost 72% of the world's population lived in countries where life expectancy at birth was less than 60 years. Reductions in mortality from the middle of 20th century have been so substantial, as a result of which the proportion of population living in countries with a life expectancy below 60 decreased to only 8.5% between 2010 and 2015. Let us look at some other statistics of life expectancy at birth. In early 1950s, the global life expectancy was at 46.9 years. At the time of ICPD, major progress in survival was achieved and it got reflected in the life expectancy at birth of 64.8 years in 1995, and which was 18 years longer than 4 decades earlier. Since then, 5.2 years of life expectancy has been attained, and as a result the global life expectancy reached 70 years during 2010-2015. If you look at the life expectancy at birth across the regions, since 1950 all the regions have seen substantial increase in life expectancy at birth. World as a whole gained 23.7 years of life expectancy since early 50s, and it reached 70.5 during 2010-2015. If we look at the less developed regions, the gain was to the tune of 27.2 years, which was almost 2 times the gain compared to that of the more developed regions. This gain was primarily due to large reductions in child mortality, and in case of developed regions, they already achieved very low levels of child mortality by then. In case of the less developed regions, the levels and improvements in life expectancy varied within the region. Asia and Latin America and the Caribbean that experienced steady increase in life expectancy at birth throughout the second half of the 20th century. On the other hand, Latin America and the Caribbean had the highest level of life expectancy among the large developing regions, 51.2 years in 50-55 and 74.5 years during 2010 and 2015. If we look at Asia, the largest increase in life expectancy was recorded in this region. It increased from 42.1 years to 71.6 years between 50-55 and 2010 and 2015. In Africa, the life expectancy increased substantially from 50s till early 90s, but later on the progress slowed down during the late 80s and all through the 90s. This was mainly because of the HIV/AIDS epidemic. However, the latest indications give hope to the extent that the worst part of the epidemic has passed, and the estimated level of life expectancy at birth of 59.4 years for 2010 and 15. Now, let us look at table 1 that gives the life expectancy at birth by development group and region at 2 different time points, 1950-55 and 25 and 2015. It also indicates the absolute change and percentage change. Across the world, the life expectancy at birth got enhanced from 46.8 to 70.5 with a percentage change of 50.6. In case of more developed regions, the percentage change was 21.1. Look at the less developed regions that recorded highest percentage, one of the highest percentages rather, 65.6 years. The least developed countries experienced the highest percentage change in life expectancy at birth, 72%. Other less developed countries had a percentage change of 65.8. Africa recorded 22.2 years of absolute change and 59.4% change. Asia recorded 29.5 years of absolute change and 70% change in life expectancy at birth. Europe, as expected, recorded 21.1% change. The Oceania, New Zealand and Australia, they recorded 28.2% change in the life expectancy at birth. Figure 1 also gives the distribution of world's population by level of life expectancy at birth for a person's country or area of residence from 55 to 2010 and 2015. In 2010-2015, more and more people are living in countries or areas with very high levels of life expectancy at birth. On the other hand, in 50-55, it was a mixed picture. Many people were living in countries with low levels of life expectancy at birth. Figure 2 gives the life expectancy at birth by development group and region for the period 1950 to 2015. The trends are indicating increasing trend in case of life expectancy at birth, irrespective of the development experienced in the region. However, the more developed regions attained higher levels of life expectancy at birth at the initial period of the time reference period we are talking about. Now, let us look at the life expectancy at birth in case of women. In all the development groups as well as regions, women live longer than men. On an average, women lived 4.5 years longer than men in 2010 and 2015. This female advantage indicates that the life expectancy at birth for women globally was 6.5% higher than that for men. The female advantage in terms of life expectancy at birth was found to be largest in the more developed region, with women living 6.4 years longer than men during 2010 and 2015. In case of less developed regions, this advantage was 3.7 years. The difference in life expectancy at birth by sex is the smallest in the least developed countries, with a duration of 2.9 years. The change we have noticed has been larger in the less developed regions, where the difference was 1.9 years in 50-55 and 3.7 years in 2010 and 2015. Difference by sex. Let us now move to the child survival related statistics. The global progress in child survival since 1990 has been substantial. Child mortality rate, besides under 5 mortality rate, declined at a remarkable pace of about 3% per year between 1990 and 2015. In spite of this significant improvement, the ambitious target of 2/3 reduction between 1990 and 2015 as per MDG 4 was not achieved at global level according to UN reports. Worldwide, UFMR under 5 mortality rate fell by 45% between 1995 and 2010 and 2015. In 2010-2015, UFMR in case of less developed regions was 54 per thousand. It was more than 9 times higher compared to that of the more developed regions. During 2010 and 2015, the least developed countries had higher level of under 5 mortality rate. Among other countries in the less developed regions, risk of dying before the age of 5 was 45 per thousand live births, which is slightly more than half of the level of the least developed countries. If we look at the child survival improvements by region, within the less developed regions, Asia experienced most rapid reduction in child mortality, a reduction of about 53%. The pace of decline in under 5 mortality was slower in Oceania, Australia and New Zealand. Africa experienced an intermediate pace of decline, with U5MR reducing by 46%. Let us now move to adult mortality. mortality that affects young and middle aged adults of 15 to 59 years is becoming increasingly preventable through chances. Mortality affecting young and middle aged adults, that is persons aged 15 to 59 years, is becoming increasingly preventable through changes in risk behaviors such as reduction in tobacco use or through medical interventions such as early detection and treatment of cervical cancer and cardiovascular diseases. Let us look at the trends in adult mortality. In 1950-55, no country had probability of dying between exact ages of 15 and 60 years. That was lower than 100 per thousand alive at age of 15. In 2010-2015, 35% of global adult age population lived in countries with adult mortality less than 100 per thousand. During 50-55, 45% of the world's population aged 15 to 59 years lived in countries where adult mortality was 450 per thousand or higher. During 2010-2015, number of persons aged 15 to 59 years living in countries with adult mortality of 450 or higher was 0.2% of the total global population. The adult mortality, like child mortality, is highly correlated with level of development. Let us now look at the differentials by development group. In the less developed region, risk of dying between 15 and 60 has been higher than that in more developed regions. For instance, during 2010 and 2015, probability that a 15-year-old in LDR, means less developed region, dies before age 60 was 161 per thousand, which is 30% higher than the figure compared to the more developed regions. The least developed countries are particularly disadvantaged in terms of adult survival, where 240 per thousand or 24% of 15-year-olds die before the age of 60. Adult mortality is higher for men than for women across the regions. The magnitude of difference in adult mortality by sex varies considerably across the regions. Australia and New Zealand, Northern, Southern and Western Europe, Eastern Asia and Northern America, these are the regions with lowest levels of adult mortality. Males in Eastern Europe have exceptionally high adult mortality at 285 per thousand. As a consequence, Eastern Europe has the largest sex differential in adult mortality with a male to female ratio of 2.6. The Southern Europe has a ratio of more than 2. Let us look at figure 3 that indicates the extent of female advantage in life expectancy at birth by region. The arrows in the chart indicate the change from 1950 and 2015. The male life expectancy at birth and the female life expectancy at birth. The chart clearly indicates the female advantage in terms of life expectancy at birth across the regions with considerable differentials between the regions. Figure 4 gives the adult mortality rate by sex and region for the period 2010 and 2015. These rates are per thousand persons aged 15 years. South Africa, many of the African countries for that matter, Western Africa, Middle Africa, Eastern Africa, all these countries recorded very higher levels of adult mortality rate. On the other hand, Australia, New Zealand, Southern Europe, Western Europe, Northern Europe, Eastern Asia, these are the countries that have recorded very low levels of adult mortality. Across the countries, across the regions, males always had higher levels of adult mortality compared to females. As we have seen in the figures earlier, highest levels of adult mortality for men as well as women were recorded in 4 regions of sub-Saharan Africa: Eastern, Middle, Southern and Western Africa. Let us look at the adult mortality situation in South Africa. Highest levels of adult mortality were recorded in South Africa. The figure was 462 out of 1000 men and 412 out of 1000 women were expected to die between 15 and 60 years, given the age specific mortality risks observed during 2010 and 2015. South Africa has been heavily affected by HIV/AIDS epidemic, and it continues to contribute to this kind of relatively higher risk of adult mortality. Let us now move to another indicator, the life expectancy at 60 years. This is the expected number of remaining years of life after age 60, and it has increased steadily since 1950s, roughly at a pace of about 1 year per decade. A person aged 60 years could expect to live another 20 years compared to 14 years during 1950 and 1955. This trend in life expectancy at the age of 60 is even more impressive considering the size of population that is involved. During 50-55, 54% of the older persons, that is 60 plus years, lived in countries where remaining life expectancy at age 60 was less than 15 years. During 2010 and 2015, this got reduced to only 2% of the population of elderly. Before 2010, no country had life expectancy at age 60 that was higher than 25 years. In 2005-2010, Japan became the first country to cross the threshold. By 2010-2015, about 0.8% of the global population aged 60 plus years was living in 7 countries or areas where life expectancy at age 60 exceeded 25 years. Japan, Hong Kong, Italy, Singapore, Switzerland were these 7 countries. Let us now look at figure 5. It gives the distribution of global population aged 60 plus years by level of life expectancy at age 60 in a person's country or area of residence from 50-55 to 2010 and 2015. One can see the improvements in life expectancy at age 60 during the period of 50-55 and 2010 and 2015. During 50-55, many people were living in countries with lower levels of life expectancy at the age of 60. By 2010-2015, more and more people were living in countries with higher levels of life expectancy at the age of 60 years. That includes even more than 25 years. This is a tremendous increase in the life expectancy at the age 60, which indicates significant improvement in the area of mortality across the regions of the world. Now, let us summarize the points that let us now summarize the points that were discussed in this module so far. There has been substantial global progress in life expectancy at birth since 1950s. However, there are significant differences across the regions and within the regions as well. From 1950 to 2015, number of years that a newborn is expected to live on an average increased worldwide by 24 years or 3.6 years per decade. Under 5 our child mortality rates declined at remarkable pace, nearly 3% per year during 1990 and 2015. The child mortality rates are currently about 45% lower than the levels during 1990 and 95. However, progress has been uneven because an increasing proportion of child deaths still occur in sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia. Further reductions in under 5 mortality rate will be necessary when we are talking about the SDGs that need to be achieved by 2030. Accelerating the progress that was registered during the Millennium Development Goals period needs attention. In particular, new policies to reduce socio-economic inequalities and to improve the living conditions of most disadvantaged are needed. Mortality among the young and middle-aged adults is increasingly preventable through change in the risk behaviors and seeking timely medical assistance. Globally, probability of dying between the ages 15 and 60 decreased by 60% between 50 and 2015. This was about 9% per decade. Adult mortality, like child mortality, is closely linked to the level of development. Another point that emerged pertains to mortality at older adult ages. There has been improvement in case of mortality at older adult ages as well. The life expectancy at age 60 has been increasing steadily since 1950s by about 1 year per decade. So, this module has helped us to get a fair understanding about the mortality situation in different regions of the world, more developed, less developed regions and the least developed countries in terms of adult mortality, child mortality, under 5 mortality and maternal mortality. Besides the life expectancy at birth, the life expectancy at birth at the age of 60 years. In terms of all these indicators related to mortality, considerable progress has been recorded in various regions of the world, particularly the development initiatives in the line of MDGs helped us immensely in moving in this right direction. These efforts need to be continued to achieve the sustainable development goals set to be achieved by 2030. Thank you so much.